In this video, I'm going to be sharing 17 Mod Podge hacks and DIYs for you to try on your next project. For this little riser, we're going to be taking one of Dollar Tree's scrap wood pieces and doing a napkin iron-on decoupage method to it with the natural wood. You can absolutely paint your piece up if you want. Your napkin design will pop more, but I love sharing how you can use pieces in their natural state to look like it's blended into the wood. To get started, go ahead and throw a nice healthy layer of Mod Podge all over your piece of wood. When it looks like this, set it off to the side to dry naturally for a couple hours. Then pick your napkin, my friends, and you're going to need to get that top decorative layer away from that sneaky underneath layer. There are several different ways to remove your napkins. One of the easiest is just to tear a corner. Usually it reveals the sneaky under layer and I can just pull them right apart. Now it's time to bring in the iron, and make sure to grab you some parchment paper. You're going to want to put that right over top of your napkin. Pick an end and slowly push the iron back and forth, moving from one side to the next. This is just going to help push any possible bubbling or wrinkling all the way to the other side. So instead of going all around the edges and then coming back to the middle and possibly having some bubbles, it just eliminates that. Before you start removing the excess napkin, just go around the edges and make sure it's all completely attached. I'm just taking my finger sander and going straight down to pull all the excess napkin off. Now I want to round off those edges. This is going to really allow that napkin to completely look blended into that piece of wood. And I do not recommend doing this if your napkin is not completely on your piece of wood. It is going to just ruin your piece. For the legs of this little riser, I'm just going to be using some of Dollar Tree's little Christmas trees. Use whatever you would like for your legs. I'm also going to be creating a smidge of an ombre look with some antique Waverly wax so that the bottom is slightly darker as it blends to the top. Just a cool little aesthetic accent to this piece. And then I'm taking some tacky glue and attaching all of them to the bottom. I allowed this piece to dry completely overnight and then came back in with some of Mod Podge's hard coat. This stuff is water resistant, so in the event if we want to put it in the bathroom or the kitchen, we are protected. And a good tip to help reduce any further wrinkling, even after this is dry, apply your sealer in thin layers. We're going to need some glossy Mod Podge for this DIY Mod Podge hack. And the reason for the glossy over the mat is look at this ceramic candle holder here. It's glossy. We're going to keep most of the piece just like it is and add a little bit of accent to the bottom. See the ridges? They're going to help us create an ombre effect using the color we already have without actually creating an ombre effect. Don't be confused, let me explain. These are two Dollar Tree pieces. I took my mica powder paint mixture, I love to call it, and created an ombre effect. I had several people say that they struggle blending and they have a hard time creating ombre. So I want to show you an idea of how you can get a look like this without needing to use two colors. And finding a piece that has little raised areas or rigid pieces like this is really going to help increase that effect easily. First, you're going to need to decide which color mica powder you need, and today I've decided to go with black. And people don't start questioning me about the ratio and saying, Brandy, how much to how much? Listen, mix with love, my friends, mix with love. I'm gonna say I do a tappity tap of the mica powder and about a tablespoon of Mod Podge, okay? And then whatever that is. If you think you need some more, add some more. The more mica powder color or pigment you have in here, the deeper and more rich it will be versus, you know, the less, it'll be less. I'm going to use a pouncer for this, but feel free to use whatever works best for you. Glass, I like to use like a pouncer or cut up little piece of sponge. Just helps best if I tappity tap 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 on that sucker versus, you know, swiping with a paintbrush. It leaves stripes. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I don't mind doing a paintbrush at the end to smooth it out, but ceramic and glass and smooth surfaces that I'm not prepping, it works best for me. See how we're starting at the bottom and just gingerly working our way up? This is super easy. It literally took me just a few minutes to do, and this stuff dries really, really quickly. You can obviously make the bottom as thick as you want. And then when you're ready to start creating that ombre effect where it's blending into the whites, you start gently tapping up the sides of just the ridges. Then you'll see that you have that white blending into the black towards the bottom on the sides that are more dented in and not the ones that are popping out. Once this is dry, if you want to completely go over it with a clear gloss just so everything looks extremely blended, you can go right ahead, but I didn't on here, so you could see that it looks just fine just like this. Be decoupaging on metal, it's important that we use a paint to prime our piece that we know is going to stick to that material really well. If you don't have access to a DIY retailer, here are two other options I have used many times that I can pick up from Walmart, and the folk art I can usually grab from Hobby Lobby if you have one of those local to you as well. For this project, I decided to go with this because I know it works really well against metal, and if you're ever interested in trying out some DIY paint or looking for a retailer, my friend Sammy at Unicorn Dust Designs sells it. I usually keep a link down in the description box. And on a side note, people, look at the size of this pouncer I had in my stash. It took me just a couple minutes to get the first coat on this pizza pan. Whenever I'm painting on metal or glass, I always like to use a pouncer or a sponge. And then I tappity tap 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 the product all over our project. And usually it takes 1 or 2 coats and I get a really nice coverage instead of painting it. And a quick little tip I want to share with you, this works for glass or metal. You want to take your finger and scrape along the paint, making sure it is attached before you start decoupaging anything. If you notice with those tiny little scrapes that your paint is coming up, your Mod Podge is probably not going to stick to the surface as you're decoupaging. You're going to have some separation. So do one of two things. Apply another layer of the paint that you're using and allow that to dry, or switch up the paint because the paint you're using might not be made for that surface. And in some cases, it also might not be fully dry. In worst case scenario, you absolutely do not have access to the paint. You can use Rust-Oleum Clear Matte spray paint, seal over it, let it dry. That has worked for me in a pinch, but brushing on sealers with paint that doesn't stick to those materials can be tricky, so just be careful. How about this napkin, people? Isn't it pretty? This was sent to me by a subscriber. Thank you so much. I am so excited to be using this on our pizza pan, and yes, it fits perfectly, but we got to trim it down to size. And there are so many ways to do this, but for this particular project, I'm just going to flip the napkin on the back side so we have a nice clear visual of where the pencil marks are going to be. I decided I am going to keep this very clean cut and I'm not going to add anything around the border, so I want this as precise and as perfect as I can get it. I made sure to hold my one hand and my arm kind of over the napkin as much as I could so it didn't move around while I was doing this. Then when I was happy with the circle I made, I tore a little corner to reveal the top decorative layer and then sectioned it enough apart that it went over the piece that we're going to be pulling apart before I started cutting. And then I just cut the entire circle out and peeled the top layer off. I was worried that if I waited to pull the sneaky layer off the back after I trimmed this down that I might have ruined a side, and I needed it perfect. And I needed to leave that extra ply on there so I could see the pencil mark. I didn't want to pencil the back of the decorative layer because the napkin was so dark. I knew I wasn't going to be able to see it to cut the perfect circle. For our application, I'm going to use a fan brush. This is just my go-to whenever I'm decoupaging a napkin. It just works best for me. By all means, use whatever you would like. I made sure the napkin was in the exact spot that I wanted it and then peeled a section back. I applied a little bit of Mod Podge and then started spreading out a very small section. There are a ton of ways to decoupage and there are a lot of decoupage artists. I like to believe that the things that I share in my content, doing this for so long, are just things that work best for me, and I like to share them hoping they help you at home. And one way I found that really reduces your wrinkles on your napkin projects is to do a tiny bit of Mod Podge and then to press down your napkin gently over it. If you oversaturate your piece with a ton of Mod Podge, because I know it feels like you need a whole lot to get it to work, it's possible it's going to create wrinkles. But in the event that I do have too much Mod Podge in certain sections, I like to use a dry sponge. I usually get these in a pack from Walmart and I'll cut them down in size and just push down in the sections. This helps to absorb any extra Mod Podge that may be there into the sponge, and it also helps to flatten out your piece in the exact spot without smearing it back and forth. Sometimes when I use cling wrap, it will tear my napkin. Once your sponge gets all crusty, musty, sometimes after you've used it a bunch of times, you will notice it starts to get hard. The Mod Podge will harden it. I'll then cut that sucker up and reuse it to apply paint on different things. And then I just flip my napkin the opposite side of where I've applied it and continue the same method until I have a complete application. Now, while this is drying, you can take the opportunity to cut up your florals or paint any extra pieces that you want to attach to your pizza pan. If you want to put a layer of sealer over this, once it is all dry, you go right ahead before you apply on your florals and ribbons and things like that. This would also be perfect with a little hanger for you to hang on the wall or just leave it to sit around your home. For this Mod Podge hack, I'm going to be sharing how to use Mod Podge to prevent bleed through using a stencil. For our demonstration purposes, we're going to be remaking over this little, I think it's Dollar Tree. Let me know in the comments below if you actually know where it's from. I don't remember. I just seen it in my stash. I'm like, this will go great with my kitchen stencil I want to use for this project. To prep the piece, I just painted the whole thing with Waverly's black ink chalk paint. And then I went over it with a multi-surface white paint. Do this however you want or start fresh. I only applied 2 coats on here and that was just fine with me. Put as many coats as you need on your piece. We're going to just use regular matte Mod Podge, and you can use whatever Mod Podge you would like for your projects. As you can see here, this stencil is a little large, okay? And I love this stencil. I'm not cutting it down, so we're going to have to make it work. And I thought this would be perfect for this project for those of you that also don't want to cut down your stencils. As you can see here, even if I'm holding it down, there's some gapping. So it's always a good idea to grab your painter's tape and tape down your stencil if the project allows for it. Sometimes it doesn't. And real quick, I want to share this awesome find I picked up at Ross. My local Ross has a craft section and they have amazing deals. I grabbed this for $3.99. And if you're hanging out with me on my browsing channel, you already see me grab this. But for those of you that don't, I love sharing deals, so here is one. I personally like using fat synthetic brushes like this whenever I'm doing a Mod Podge application to prevent bleed through. It really helps control the amount of Mod Podge versus using a sponge or a pouncer, and it allows for thin applications, which here's the great reason for that. It dries super quick, people, super quick. I did 2 layers just to ensure that the Mod Podge was completely covering over the stencil. Now, if you don't want to do the Mod Podge method, you can absolutely take the same paint that you covered your piece with the base coat and go over your stencil doing the same thing. It's going to give you the same effect. In about 20 to 30 minutes, your piece should be dry. And if you pull it up to your face, you're gonna notice that all the little places that the stencil could be separated from your project, they're kind of all sealed in. I'm going to be using a pouncer for our application and apply the on-load, off-load method with it. And all that is taking a bunch of the paint that you plan on using on your stencil, getting it all nice and sopped up in whatever you're using as your applicator, and then tapping as much of it out until it's basically dry. And then start tapping on your stencil. This on its own is going to help reduce bleed through in addition to using this Mod Podge hack. So it's kind of a 2-for-1 there. And I don't know if you noticed my hand sneaking up in the corner to hold down the painter's tape that was popping up on me. Painter's tape was not trying to keep my stencil in place. It just wanted to keep popping up. Keep onloading and offloading your applicator as much as you need to. And don't be alarmed if your stencil sticks a little bit, because you know, Mod Podge is sticky and it did seal it in together. I tried to get a really nice close-up and hold it still for you so you could see how amazing this works to cut down the bleed through. For this Mod Podge hack, I would recommend using wood with this. Now I have this live edge wood that I get from a vendor at the same market that I'm a vendor at, and I cut these suckers on down. We're going to need some book pages, or you could use some dictionary pages, or regular paper, but nothing glossy or satin or sheen, people, okay? We're going to use some water on a paintbrush to really trim down these pages to fit inside of our wood piece. And you can take this idea and remix it to whatever works for you, and you can get wood cut down at Home Depot or use a Dollar Tree wood piece. There's tons of wood pieces that you can take this idea and just do whatever type of DIY you want to do with it. But I personally say use wood because I just feel it's a little bit more forgiving whenever you're using a lot of like liquid on top of it than a glass or like a porcelain piece. When you're happy with the size you cut your paper down to, just decoupage them onto your piece and then pray this don't happen to you. What the hell is going on here? Oh my God, it's not coming out. I don't know why that grosses me out so much. It just reminds me of real boogers. I'm still over here gagging. Anyhow, you're going to want to just attach your paper down to your wood piece. And as you can see, I'm not necessarily carrying how much Mod Podge on here. I'm not doing it over wild, you know what I mean, putting too much on, but paper is a whole different animal than napkin or tissue paper. And I'm even taking a little plastic tool here and squeegeeing it, pressing to the edge to squeeze out, well, if I can hold it in my hand, till I get the excess out at the edges. And then I just kind of grab the extra that puddles around the sides. This is just going to help keep your wrinkles down to a minimum. And usually paper is the easiest thing. If you're a beginner at decoupage, paper is going to be the go-to. You might have some little sections around the edges that are lifted and not completely sealed down. And that's fine, because our next part, our actual hack, is going to make sure that this paper is completely sealed down. I can't wait to share this piece with you, especially because I do decoupage art all the time. But this is just one that I love doing and using. You're going to need little bowls with a tiny bit of water in them for every color you plan on using. I'm using 3 for this, and to start out, we're going to do just like we would if we're going to make some stain art. We're going to water down our acrylic paint, and we only need a small amount. It took me a second here blending different colors because I was going for a certain blend here. I wanted to get really colorful with this piece. The reason you don't want to use any type of paper that is shiny or has a sheen is because it almost has a protective coating. So when you're going to do this hack and turn your paper different colors, it will prevent the Mod Podge and the paint and the water mixture from seeping in and actually creating the colored decoupage top layer. If you're one of the people that like to change the color of their papers and use coffees and teas, this is a really good way for you to skip all of that and just use a little bit of Mod Podge and add that to any color paint with a little bit of water, and you can change easily to anything you want. What is that? Why are you happening? Why is there Mod Podge boogers everywhere? I don't know what was wrong with this particular Mod Podge bottle, but anyhow, if you're going to ask me what ratio, people, I kind of wing it. And to be honest with you, I think I probably put about a tablespoon of Mod Podge in there because you want to make sure you have enough that when this starts to dry, it's going to seal over it. So when you're decoupaging a piece like this, and say you wanted to just add a little bit of brown with some tan and maybe some vanilla to create a vintage look, you can go right ahead and do that and just seal over the whole piece, and it's going to give you that effect. Now, obviously, you can get colorful like I am, and as long as you're making sure your brush is fairly dry when you're going about this, it's not going to rip your paper at all. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, Brandy, why don't we just paint the thing? Well, you want to add the water because it dilutes it so you can actually see through the paint better. And then you want to add the Mod Podge because as it dries, it's going to seal the paper. Instead of you just having soggy, wet paper and then having to really wait for that to dry before you try to seal over it with a plain Mod Podge, this is going to give you more freedom and more durability with the paper because it will start to wear down in time. Especially if it's wet, it's dry, and you're trying to put colors on it, it's going to get saturated. It's a different consistency. And you'll notice as you're working with this that the actual mixture is a little thick. So as you're applying it, it's drying as I'm going because it has that Mod Podge in there. Now, obviously, you don't want to just do this to a piece of paper on its own because then the paper is just going to be nice and hard. That kind of came out wrong. Anyhow, you want to make sure that you're actually doing this on top of a piece like we did this wood, so that way it changes the color and seals it onto the piece all at the same time. If you want to just change the color of the paper, then use your normal coffee and tea DIY hack. We're going to take this stencil here and we're going to just make sure that it is applied on top of here really well. Also make sure that this is dry. It does not take long to dry. That's another awesome thing about coloring your paper. It does not take long. And then I'm putting a raised stencil on here. You could just do a regular stencil if you want, but I'm super in love with this Tim Holtz paste right now. So I'm using it every little opportunity that I get. Plus, I do raise stencils a lot. And people, if you don't have a fancy schmancy spreading tool like I have here, just, use a spoon, a plastic spoon, anything. It doesn't really matter. Use a, tongue depressor or a popsicle stick, whatever you guys call it. Just spread it on there with whatever you have laying around. It doesn't have to be fancy schmancy. And then when you're happy with it, just pull it on up. There are so many different ways you can use the top layer to seal your Mod Podge to color paper and create different DIYs. I absolutely love using multicolors and raised stencils over wood pieces to make ones like this. For this decoupage pedestal stand, we're going to need to start off by grabbing us a Dollar Tree basket and one of these industrial candle holders. For the top of the tray, we're going to need a round or an oval piece. I didn't have any at my local Dollar Tree. This was in my stash, so I'm just going to roll with this. I want to do the iron-on method to the top of this piece, so I'm taking a lot of Mod Podge and applying it to all the sections of this round piece that I want it to attach to. If you want a nice crisp line around your edges where you separate the piece you're decoupaging, make sure to take your time and apply nice thick layers all around the edges. When your piece looks like this, set it off to the sides and let it dry for a couple hours naturally. For our decoupage portion, we're going to be using this beautiful decoupage tissue paper. Over on my Facebook page, I do have a TDS community group where we just share all things related to crafts and decoupage and TDS. I put out a little poll over there and asked them what section of this paper that they like the best, and the section we're going to decoupage on the top of this won. And for anyone wondering what is TDS, it stands for the DIY Struggle. It is my brand, and over on my website, thediystruggle.com, I have a decoupage paper line with over 40 designs for you to choose from, a transfer line, small rice paper print. A question I get asked a lot is if you can iron on tissue paper, and that is why I wanted to do this particular project, is to show you that you absolutely can. I want to save as much of this paper as possible, so I decided to just trace around the part that I wanted, and I just cut that out. Now it's time for us to bring on in our iron. This little sucker usually sits right next to me at the craft table. It is not the exact iron that you have to use for projects like this, so please don't feel like this is the only iron. You can use whatever iron you would like. I do turn mine all the way up before I begin. You're going to want to make sure to grab you some parchment paper. This is going to help you apply your piece. It's going to protect your paper from getting any possible burn marks from the iron. It's also going to help reduce any ability for your iron to stick to your paper or to the project if there's Mod Podge around it. The parchment paper does a multitude of things. I also get asked very often, can you use wax paper? Wax paper is not heat resistant. Wax paper is mostly used to stop as like a non-stick surface. Parchment paper is heat resistant, so it does make a little bit of a difference. Now, I'm not saying I've never used wax paper in a pinch, but you know, parchment paper is what you're supposed to use. And one rule of thumb that I kind of try to follow whenever I'm doing this method is to pick a side and go from one side to the next. This will help prevent any bubbling up in the center. When you're all done, check around the edges to make sure everything's attached, and then get a little piece of sandpaper and go around sanding. I like to just go straight down with my sandpaper just in case anything isn't attached around the edge. We don't have any bunching and can fix that. Once your piece is completely dry, if you want to put some sealer over it, you go right ahead. Make sure you do little thin layers instead of going in heavy. It's going to help reduce wrinkles as it dries. Now it's time to assemble our piece. You can leave your basket in the shape that it is, but I wanted mine a little bubbly, and this stuff is easy to manipulate. So I just made mine look like this, and then I flipped it over on the bottom and grabbed the top of our tray and put it into place. I flipped it upside down and then grabbed this little wood piece. You could use whatever wood piece you want as long as it fits on top of our little industrial candle holder here. I'm using tacky glue and hot glue to be able to attach this to the metal basket and have something solid for our metal candle holder to attach to. You can skip this next part if you want to, but I wanted to add some fairy lights, at least for the staging purposes, and an extra idea because it looks so amazing. You can remove this, obviously, if you just tape it in here. Feel free to glue yours down. Take the idea and remix it into whatever works for your home decor. I absolutely just think this idea is so amazing. Look how awesome this looks. Etsy dupe is going to be a little bit more spot on. We're going to literally create this piece, and the only thing we're switching out is the pictures. We're going to use farmhouse pictures. You can use whatever pictures you want. You could even do a reverse decoupage with real pictures if you want it for this piece. Now I use my rice paper. I do not like using this to kind of cut and piece together. So I'm taking the larger of the pictures and I'm going to place them completely over the wood pieces that we're going to put them on. They did not completely cover, and I'm going to show you in the reveal how you can see that there is a raised spot on the side. I wish that they completely cover, but once I got them to the point where I was cutting them down, I'm like, shoulda, woulda, coulda at this point. We're rolling on with it. I picked these pieces up from Hobby Lobby, and I'm just going to paint them white for the background. I'm keeping the wood themselves neutral. I left them completely neutral. I used my medium and I just decoupaged these suckers right on here. I made sure that the edges were all nice and tight, and once they dried, I took an 80 grit sandpaper and sanded around our edges. Now I did have a few little bubbles in here, and let me show y'all how I handle this, okay? We're gonna just take a little Cricut tool, our little Cricut tool. You can use a pin if you don't have this. Pin will work just fine. And we're gonna just pop it right on down. Press it easy. Don't get wild and start wiggling it. You're just going to go straight down till you touch the wood and then pull it right back out. And you just keep going around and popping all your little bubbles and then press it down with your finger or your thumb like I'm doing. And then put your sealer right over it and you'll have a nice flat surface. If you don't use the iron-on method, this is a great way to get rid of bubbles. Remember, I said I'm not fuzzy inside about using the iron-on method with the printouts from the printer. Even with the parchment paper, I am scared that the ink is going to pop up a bit. To create our square frames, I'm going to use 2 different size little square dowels out of this multi-pack. Picked this up from Walmart. It's like $5 or $6. Hobby Lobby, Home Depot, and Lowe's all sell square dowels. So in the event that your Walmart doesn't have this pack, you can pick them up there. Walmart even has dowels and you get like a couple feet for a couple dollars. I use this multi-pack all the time, so I pick it up whenever I see it. My Walmart doesn't always have it. Just in case yours don't either, you now know where you can also get more. What you're currently witnessing is me winging the measurements. I did not actually measure this to size, and I just cut and cut and cut until I got the size square that I was happy with that fit behind these little wood ovals. Now we're gonna bring in the stapler because we had to bring the stapler in for this project. And the Gorilla Glue. I love this stuff. It sets in like 10 seconds. Not completely, but it starts working pretty quickly. So I put little dabs on the edges and then I held it in place and stapled. I made sure that this was facing the back of the shape that we were creating. And I did this for each corner, making sure that one piece of the staple was in one side and one piece of the staple was the other side. That was not the easiest thing. Don't let the video footage fool you. It took some patience making sure that I had that stapler in there just right. I let that dry for about 10 minutes just to make sure that it was decently put together, and then attached our little oval pieces. I did this by just using wood glue. I didn't add any clamps or anything. I put the wood glue where the oval met on the corners and kind of smooshed some more in between there once I was happy with the placement, and I let this dry overnight. Now let's take a quick look at our Etsy dupe inspiration piece again. And now here's mine. And as I said, remember I would show you in the reveal that you can see around the edges how it's a little bit raised through the paint, even where I tried to blend it. Still looks good, but it's not as good as if the rice paper would be slightly thinner. Decoupage in a basket, right up my alley. However, we're going to recreate this a way I don't think you're going to see coming. In my mind, I seen that and thought, mini cute basket with some tumbling blocks. And when I say mini, people, I mean mini. We're using a whole 4 tumbling blocks. That's all the length this little basket is going to be. For the attachments, I'm going to be using Titebond's Quick and Thick for a long hold and the hot glue for a quick and instant hold. If you've never really crafted with tumbling blocks, it's been my experience that if you just use hot glue, the crafts just end up falling apart eventually. But if I put a little bit of wood glue on there at the same time as I'm doing the hot glue and make sure not to overlap the two, I get a really good hold and the parts usually all stay together. Sometimes I'll even go around the piece with a little paintbrush once everything's all dry and get in them creases with some more wood glue just to make sure my craft is staying together. You'll need a total of 10 tumbling blocks for the sides, 4 on the top, 4 on the bottom, and 1 on each side. I don't have any chicken wire, so instead I'm going to be using one of Dollar Tree's wire baskets. And I'm going to take my wire cutters and just snip all around the top of this basket until it's completely detached, and then do the same for the bottom. When all you have left is the middle, just pick a spot and just go straight up, so this way you just have one long piece of faux chicken wire. I then assembled the sides using 4 tumbling tower blocks with some more wood glue and hot glue. Now that I have all the pieces that we need for the most part, it's time to paint everything up before we glue it together. For the paint, I'm just keeping it blue, just like our Etsy inspiration. You can use whatever color you would like for yours at home, obviously. I also decided to paint the opposite side white that we're going to be decoupaging, so this way our napkin pops. When everything was completely dry, then it was time to decoupage and start our assembly. The first thing I did was cut the wire down so it fit right in the little window that we created with our tumbling block. Then it was time for us to bring on in the stapler. I get asked this all the time in the comments and I always forget to say something. This is from Home Depot for anyone interested where I got that stapler. Picked it up from Home Depot. For our decoupage portion, I'm going to use this napkin. I do not remember where I picked this piece up or who sent this to me, so in case anybody that's wondering, I'm sorry about that. We are going to remove just the top decorative layer so we can decoupage on here. Then I took a little bit of Mod Podge and went all around the sections that we painted white and allowed the Mod Podge to completely dry. I used a piece of parchment paper over top of the napkin and then ironed down our napkin right on top of that dry Mod Podge. Sanded off any excess and look how pretty this is. Lastly, I grabbed my wood glue and my hot glue and just put everything together. For this Mod Podge hack, we're going to be demonstrating by creating a little riser and blending the iron-on method to wood. I'm using the good old faithful matte Mod Podge here. And people, everyone is probably going to have their own opinion on the best way to iron on, and there's nothing wrong with that. We all need to use what works for us. Me personally, I like to take a lot of Mod Podge and slap it all over the sucker that I am about to iron on, and make sure it's a nice, healthy, juicy layer. And then we gotta wait for it to dry like 2 or 3 hours. And then it's time to bring in the iron. And people, feel free to use whatever iron works best for you. I use this little joint because most of the time it's sitting right next to me while I'm crafting. Here is the beautiful napkin that I picked out from my stash. Now, most of the time, and the reason why I said in the beginning, we're going to be blending it to wood is because we are not painting this. We're keeping it neutral. And a lot of people like to paint their backgrounds so this way that the white helps it pop. But I want to show you that sometimes you can take the iron-on method with a napkin, even if it has a white background, that has neutral tones and make it look as though it's part of the wood grain and the wood, and you don't know where the wood ends and the design starts, and it's just simply stunning. Just make sure you get all the sneaky layers off, my friends, okay? You have to make sure that we are just doing this with the top decorative layer, or we're gonna have foof-ups, okay? We're gonna have foof-ups. We don't want that. So the best way to avoid that is to take a second. I like to tear the little corner. Usually it's really quick for me. It reveals them and then I just separate it. Since the top is all dry with the Mod Podge, you grab your iron and you go on in. Psych! I'm just kidding. How many of you were about to attack me in the comments like, Brandy, you forgot the parchment paper. Guess what? Your girl didn't forget the parchment paper. Now it's time to bring on in the parchment paper. If you've never done the iron-on method before, parchment paper really helps to kind of separate the napkin from the iron. It allows you to be able to take the heat from the iron and press it right on top of this parchment paper, and it really melts the napkin into the Mod Podge without burning the napkin, without ripping anything off of the napkin onto the iron. Sometimes things can melt to the iron as well as damage the design. Sometimes, depending on the inks of things, inks can run and bleed. Once you're happy with your placement, I like to work from one side to the next, and it's a good idea to make sure as you're doing this that your design is flat. Sometimes if you don't, you can get bumps and creases inside of your application. It really takes a couple seconds for that Mod Podge to melt right onto the napkin, and then just roll on with the rest of your project. Feel free to seal over this after it's dry. You can use whatever type of sealer. Do keep in mind that if you're going to put this in an area that's going to get wet, you want to make sure that you use a dishwasher safe topper sealer, something that is safe with water. Now here I'm showing you how amazing this melts right on to our wood neutral backgrounds. If you have some little neutral pops, even on a white napkin, you can see the white napkin almost takes on the appearance of the wood grains. And please, people, make sure that this is completely ironed on all around your edges before you go sanding around to get the excess off. If it's not, you're gonna have some gaps around the edges and some fraying with your napkin. For this Mod Podge hack, we're going to make a mixed media mason jar lantern with a beautiful gloss over the top. First things first, get rid of the lid. We're not going to need it. Then grab your napkins, all the napkins, because we're going to need to look through the stash and find some prints that have colors that are kind of the same, but not the same, but share similar characteristics so it doesn't look too wild. You get where we're going with this. And on a side note, I want to share with you my super secret napkin piece that I have hidden. Look at this little Oreo gem. It's my precious. We're going to just stick it right back in there. And you guys never seen it. I may never use it, but now you know it's there. But we're never going to talk about it again. Okay, now moving on. You're going to take your napkins and you're going to get all the sneaky layers off because we only need the top layers, okay? And do this for as many napkins as you grabbed and then start tearing them suckers on up, just the little sections that you need, and put them over in a pile. And do it deliberately, so this way you have designs that actually make sense. Like, don't do it sideways, so this way a design isn't like a whole piece. You want to try and have something, so this way, because it's a mixed media design, you want certain things to pop. You can have like a certain pattern that really you can do whatever the heck you guys want. But I'm just saying, for me, for this, I did specific designs and that's how I rolled with it, okay? We're going to use some Mod Podge. Then we're going to just take our little section that we tore and start in a spot. There's no right or wrong way to give this a go. Just plop it on down, and then against my normal recommendation, you're going to take your paintbrush and go right over the napkin, because you got to move quickly as you're doing this so your Mod Podge stays fairly wet at the ends of the little patches that you're placing. And then this is really key to where you tore your napkins, so this way you can line up the designs. If you have some little spaces, do not fret about that, because our overall gloss that we're going to pop over here will either seal that in, or you can do like I'm doing here and just take teeny tiny little patches to seal in certain holes. That's entirely up to you how you would like to do this. But I try to make sure each design was a whole section, so as you're looking at it, you could see a full design. I let this dry for several hours and it's really pretty on its own, right? Just like this, it's nice and pretty. No, it's not. It's not pretty enough yet. we're going to need to grab some mica powder, some silver, some white, pick one. Then a little bit of glossy Mod Podge, okay? A little tiny dollop. We don't need a lot of the mica powder. And yes, it needs to be this color. And it only needs to be a little bit, because if you put any more in there, it's going to turn into a paint and then you won't really be able to see through it very well. Just need a little tappity tap and then a lot of smushing, so this way it's all mixed together. Then we're going to grab a paintbrush and gently go over the entire piece. Don't go over too many sections once this dries, because then you will not be able to see the designs from the napkins. But if you do a nice thin layer, this is going to cover any glass that is still showing, any separation between the 2, 3, 4 different types of napkins you popped on here. It's going to be a stunning mixed media lantern. Had we painted the mason jar white, we would not be able to have the lantern effect to be able to see through it with some lights. But what I love so much about the hack of using a little bit of glossy Mod Podge and a tiny bit of white or silver or mica powder is it creates just enough of a translucency and enough of a metallic sheen to tie in several different prints together and make them look like one unique creative art piece. I've been experimenting a lot with Mod Podge lately, thanks to a lot of your comments, by the way. And one of my favorite things I've learned is that we can create beautiful colored glass decor with a little bit of food coloring and some Mod Podge. One of my recent trips to Dollar Tree, I seen these beautiful pieces. The amount of Mod Podge and the amount of food coloring you're going to use is going to be entirely up to the size of the project that you're going to be doing. I only used 3 little dots of the food coloring here to get this pigment. And keep in mind, you might need to mix up another batch. This stuff does not sit well for long periods of time. It hardens really quick. It also dries really quick, so that's a good thing. Do clean your glass before you get started with any glass project. I used rubbing alcohol and just let that dry, and I'm using a soft paintbrush here to apply this. I'm making sure my strokes are fairly even because we are going to be able to see them on our first coat especially, and if you leave any heavy spots, you're going to have clumps there and it looks a little tacky. So doing a second coat, at least at the minimum, it's going to make it look nicer. I would recommend 3 coats, but for the sake of the video, I just did 2, okay? And to keep in theme with the Dollar Tree one, I took some little, nautical gem keychain things that I had laying around from a purchase I made at Amazon and put them around the neck of our little glass piece. And people, I do know another way you can create this is by taking the food color and the Mod Podge and swirling it around the inside, heating it up in the oven. But I thought to myself, I wanted to use the inside of that glass for cotton balls or Q-tips or whatever. I didn't want that product on my piece, but I still wanted to get that same beautiful colored look. And I thought this was a great idea. Trendy thing going on in the crafty world right now with Mod Podge is called the Mod Podge swirl method. You're able to get these faux stained, faux frosted glass looks by swirling Mod Podge on the back of some glass. It's been my experience that finding the floating frames with 2 pieces of glass gives some of the best results. You can pick these up at Dollar Tree, Walmart, they got them laying around. So I'm just going to leave the front of the glass inside of our piece here, and I'm going to take the back part out. We're going to use a little bit of alcohol to get any excess off of this, just clean our glass up. And recently I've been told, because I've made a bunch of these videos, I'll link them down in the description box for you, that putting black behind the glass is going to give you guys a better view. So to those of you that have been suggesting that, here we go. Let me know in the comments below if you enjoy this view better versus the white background. To get started, pick your stickers, pick your stencil, pick your transfers, whatever you want to do. I've done a multitude of things here. They all yield pretty great results. I'm using some Timu stickers here, and I'm just going to rub them right on the front. I happen to like the stickers because they just give me a quick result, and I thought these were really nice looking. I'm now going to just kind of flip that little piece right on over and clean the back of the glass. You're going to need glossy Mod Podge for this. I've tried mixing matte and glossy, and I've tried just matte, and I definitely get the best result using glossy Mod Podge for this. Pour a little bit out on a plate or wherever, take 2 fingers and then just start swirling. And you just do this all over the back of the piece. If you're happy with those results once they've dried, and this is going to take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, it really just depends on how thick. I wouldn't go in too heavy. The thicker it is, there's more of a chance of bubbles, and some people don't like the bubbles. If the bubbles don't bother you, then by all means go ham with how thick you're applying this. And here's the first layer, and I thought this actually turned out really beautiful, but from experience, I know putting that second layer on there is just going to elevate that swirl a little bit more and give you a little bit more of depth to your piece. So I did another layer, and it is always a little hard to see, but I tried to give several different angles here so you guys can really get in on it. I absolutely love these pieces and making these projects. I have several videos with this down in the description box if you're interested in seeing more. A recent trip to Dollar Tree, I grabbed these foil flakes in all 3 colors because I have no self-control, but because I have no faith in them, I also ordered some gold foil off of Amazon. What are we doing, Brandy? What's the hack? Well, recently on TikTok, I know TikTok's got all the goodies, I seen somebody using Mod Podge to attach gold foil, and I was like, oh, we gonna try this. Truth be told, I have really never used gold foil, especially not like this. And I know that they have that adhesive glue, but I've seen enough furniture artists do enough beautiful projects with it, so I had some expectations. Not extremely high though, because the TikTok video did share that you have to apply the foil as the Mod Podge is drying. It's like in a tacky stage. I don't know if you've ever like stared at Mod Podge like I do, but it has stages. Really wet, kind of dry, then it's like kind of tacky, and then it's, you think it's dry, but there's still some wet spots. You know, it goes through stages. This stuff is super thin. I mean, like super thin. It was so easily like disintegrating in my hand. So I felt like this was at a good point that I could just start pressing and tappity tap 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 in it right on the outside of the letters. I purchased these for me because someday I'm gonna have a nice little background behind me, and this is the R and the S in the DIY struggle, and I wanted different lettering, so I thought gold would look really cool on the outside of one, and then we would have the 3 colors on the outside of the other. Just in case you guys are wondering, what is the R and the S about, Brandy? As you can see, this is easy enough, right? I didn't paint a whole section with the Mod Podge, just a little section. But I can tell you, if it dries, it is not tacky at all. And like right here, that side had already dried. It was not sticking. And then see how it's wet? It almost melts the gold foil. So it definitely matters that as you're applying this, that the Mod Podge is at that tacky stage. So small sections and then, you know, move on. I decided to take this out back on my patio to get the extra foil off, and I know I didn't have the proper brush that they recommend, so I just had a chippy brush, a really soft chippy brush laying around, and figured we're going to do this. And let me tell you something. This stuff is, woo, it is messy. Like, there are glittery bits all over my patio. I wasn't sure where to get started brushing the pieces off, and then I was like, it's snowing, and as I'm standing there trying to get the gold off, I'm so mesmerized by the flakes, and I felt like I was in a giant snow globe. Anyhow, the point is, make sure you are in an area that you either don't care that you get this stuff all over the place, or you're outside to make sure that it's not getting all over your house. One thing I do know from watching Katja, if you guys are not familiar with her, she's a furniture artist. When you use this foil and the glue, it is beautiful. It's flawless. This, however, I noticed was having cracks all in it, which honestly, I don't mind. I love that kind of stuff. This turned out perfect for me, to be honest with you. I will absolutely be doing this going forward, using the Mod Podge, using the flakes. there's going to be DIYs. I'm going to be popping this in. So my patio gets used to looking like a snow globe because I'm so here for it. So me being me and having to give y'all options, I'm like, we're going to also try this with these foil flakes from Dollar Tree. And I'm like, it has to be easier because they're bits. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're little bits. I can just pop them on the Mod Podge as it's drying. Right? Wrong. First of all, I can tell you the feeling of these is definitely different from the foil from Amazon. You know what it feels like? Bubblegum wrappers. Little rolled up bubblegum wrappers. Despite my best effort with this situation, it did not matter if it was tacky or not. These foils were struggling to stay in place. And when they were, since I guess they're like bits of foils or flakes, the flakes were kind of thick in certain sections from where, you know, they felt like balled up pieces of bubblegum wrappers. They were thicker, so I started just taking some of the Mod Podge and going over top a couple of them to see if that would hold them down. And honestly, after about 15 to 20 minutes of mucking with this, I was like, you know what? This hack with the Dollar Tree flakes is just not working. However, the Mod Podge hack to use with the gold flakes, it's absolutely stunning and gives a beautiful, beautiful vintage crackle look, and I love it. For this Mod Podge hack, grab yourself a bowl or something you like the shape of and feel you can mold onto it. And then give it a couple taps on the booty. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm sorry. I just ruined a perfectly good entrance moment. Let's do that again. Next, you're going to want to bring in the parchment paper. Or do you? We're going to get there. I'm going to explain that in just a second. And I'll take any information you guys want to dish out with me with that as well. You're going to need some water. And we're using this hard coat by Mod Podge, okay? Normally, I do a lot of glass art, and you can use fabric and you can manipulate. One of my favorite ways is to use tacky glue, but I recently discovered this hard coat by Mod Podge. You can use Mod Podge as well, but it's not going to get as stiff as this stuff. And Mod Podge actually has Stiffy to help stiffen up. I can hear my mom now as I'm walking into the craft section, like, what do you need today? I gotta go buy some Stiffy, Mom. I'm sorry. I can make an inappropriate joke. I don't miss anything, but it really is a product. It stiffens your fabric. So what I was saying about the wax paper or parchment paper is that I struggled to get the tape to even stick to it. You know how like nothing's supposed to stick to this stuff? Not even the tape was sticking to it. So I just kind of flipped it over and prayed, you know. I poured a healthy amount into about a quarter cup of water and then mixed this stuff on up to get a really nice consistency. If it's too thick, it's not going to really smoosh into your fabric. It's been my experience, or whatever you're trying to attach onto anything. I struggle with that when you leave your mediums really thick, so watering them down just a little bit allows some play and some absorption, especially when you're using a fabric. To start this off, and you can do this however you want, but I do recommend starting off on the bottom, creating like that base section on the very bottom, and then taking your pieces and attaching to the bottom. This way, when you're all done, you can take one more piece and attach it over the bottom, and it kind of smushes all the pieces together that you put around the piece you attached on the bottom. You'll see how I'm doing it here, and it just gives a good end result. In my opinion, it just kind of holds everything together a little bit better. And you can do this with all kinds of stuff. You can do this with just strips of fabric. You could do this with the little, you know, Dollar Tree leaves. You can do this with florals. It's just going to take a little bit of patience, especially because you're creating a bowl. So you're going to want to also let this sit for a full 24 hours. So the form takes shape. And I will tell you, people, feel free if you want to put color in here. It will color the burlap as you're doing this, so it comes out a different color. Or if you want to wait until this is completely dry and then paint it, you could put some stencils on here and then just seal right on over it. So here is me taking another little square after I'm happy with the shape of my little bowl I've created here, and I'm just putting it over all the pieces that are connected right to the bottom of our bowl in the center here. And then I decided it needed something else. So I grabbed some of this. I never know what it is, but it really just kind of looks like mesh and coral all at the same time to me from Dollar Tree. I wanted to create just like a little, you know, decorative piece on our bowl here. So I cut this thinner, dunked it on in our little mixture, and then wrapped it right on around the center of the bowl. And then I let this sucker dry at 24 hours. And I'm gonna go live for you here real quick, people, because I want you to actually hear this as I'm doing it. This, like I said, it's 24 hours later. Watch this. Like, this sucker is hard, okay? Like, it is ridiculous how hard this thing is. You can beat it on the wall and it is just not falling apart. So you want to create something, that Mod Podge, that hardening Mod Podge is absolutely ridiculous. This bowl turned out super flipping cute. I use mica powder all the time in my content, and I forget to talk about this often. I'm like, as I'm thinking about this Mod Podge video, I'm like, this is definitely a hack. It is definitely a way for people to get more creative, more unique, mixing different things. And what I love so much about this is it really sticks to any surface. I have used this on mirrors, I've used this on furniture, I've used this on regular wood, all kinds of things. The mica powder bonds so well to the Mod Podge, and it creates stunning, unique, with a little bit of like a shine to it look. And people, this mica powder is really inexpensive. I picked these up from Amazon, and I only picked them up because they were like the cheapest thing that they had. Don't start me lying to you. There was nothing special about the mica powder. It was cheap, so I purchased it. Now, to get started, you're just going to take some Mod Podge and mix it up. I decided to just use one plate, plop 3 different little sections of Mod Podge, and then I took my mica powder and I just tap it right on into our Mod Podge. Now, be mindful, because this stuff, no. See what happens when you get cocky with your tappiness? Eventually karma comes back to smack you like, nah, you're not that great. Anyhow, be careful. It's messy on its own, and if you over tap, it definitely makes a huge mess. And then mix it up. This is going to take a little bit of patience. It probably took me a good 10 minutes to mix the 3 of these together, because the mica powder is super, super fine. I just cut up a piece of sponge for this. You could absolutely ball up a tissue or a piece of paper towel. I've done that before. Just be mindful if it sheds. You could use a little coral sponge or a regular pouncer. Any of that would work. I don't recommend using a paintbrush for this, but you do you. Don't let me tell you how to craft. Because I want to create an ombre look, I'm starting with the darkest color first at the bottom. And I did 2 layers on these without blending anything, and I let them dry. Of course, it's all sped up, so you guys don't see all that extra. But you can see we have the silvery white on the top and then the black on the bottom. And if you were using paint, I would tell you to have a paintbrush or a sponge, whichever you would be using at that point, that doesn't have anything on it to blend. But because we're using mica powder, this stuff is really thick, and it also gives a little bit of a texture. You're going to just alternate your sponges and go over the lines where they kind of meet each other, and just take your time with this. It's a really soothing, satisfying craft in my opinion, and I could just create stuff like this all day long. I just really enjoy the process. And going back and forth, you just get this beautiful blended look. Just take your time and then move the color up, and then take your lighter color and then go over the darker color, and you're just going to have such a cohesive appearance with the piece. And I do want to say that if you're going to do this on wood, let me know in the comments below if you want to see more with this type of stuff in the content. I will put DIYs in other Friday videos with different ways to be able to use mica powder as paint, and I'll show you different ways we can use it even with paintbrushes on different types of surfaces. I love this so much, and I think this would also look amazing with some candle wax in there and some little potpourri pieces at the top, just like a little decorative aspect of it. I absolutely love giving you creative ideas to turn books into beautiful pieces of decor, but sometimes y'all give me some slack about it. Even though I have shared that over 300 million books get tossed into our landfills each year. So upcycling them, crafters, is actually help save our environment. With all that being said, I aim to please, and I love giving y'all options. So we're gonna take this piece of wood and turn it into a beautiful piece of book decor. Fake book decor, that is. We're going to start off by needing a piece of decorative trim for our spine, and I popped over Home Depot, I say Depot, you guys call it whatever you want. In this little section here, you can get little decorative pieces of trim, and they're really inexpensive. So I'm going to take a piece and just chop it down to size, and to do that, we're going to need to bring on in the miter shears. I mean, really, use whatever you would like to cut yours down. This is what I'm going to use. We're also going to be using a wood applique. You can pick these up off Amazon. You can pick them up at Lowe's, Home Depot, Hobby Lobby. These in particular on my website. And I'm just going to cut it down into little sections. So I get 3 pieces to be able to put on our faux book. And if you don't want to use a wood applique, you can use molds, whatever you would like. Take the idea and remix it. To attach all of our pieces, I'm going to be using Titebond's Quick and Thick. Feel free to use whatever you would like. On wood, I usually like to use either tacky glue or wood glue, or this is like my new go-to stuff. A smear just a little bit all over our wood pieces and then put them into place on the spine of our book. Now for the front of our book, we're going to create a little frame using a piece of rice paper. Use whatever you would like for this idea. I'm going to take this little steampunk piece, inspired me a bit. I've been wanting to use this. I truly love every little design on this sheet of my TDS rice paper, but I wanted to use this balloon one. Now I had another piece of trim from Home Depot, and I'm just going to cut that down, making 45-degree cuts. So this way it all fits together perfectly around that top wood applique piece. If you don't want to frame your piece like this, use molds, use whatever works best for you. Now we have to create that background for a decoupage piece, so I'm just going to take a little bit of white chalk paint and set a base down. And for our main color, I'm just going to take some black chalk paint and cover the entire rest of our book. Once I had the parts of the book painted that I wanted, I allowed this to dry and then came on in with my TDS artist brushes. These are in the fan style. They are perfect for decoupage, and I'm going to use them to apply this rice paper in the section where we painted that white paint. This allows our design to pop, and it also helps us to be able to create different colors. How we have the black, you could absolutely paint this whatever color you want, but the white behind whatever you're decoupaging really allows for the design and your napkin, your tissue paper, whatever, to really show through. Now this rice paper works really well if you spritz a little water on the back after you've added your medium on there. Helps reduce your wrinkles. Works so well just to take my fingers and flatten it right out. While that little section was drying, I grabbed my folk art metallic paints and applied a layer on top of our trim pieces and did a little dusting over the spine of our book. I added some of my Type On Quick and Thick to the back of these little trim pieces and then applied them around our piece for our frame. I decided to grab some spackling and put right in the corners, so this way we didn't have such gaps where the frame didn't exactly meet. This didn't take very long to dry, and when it did, I grabbed my little finger sander and just took that excess off and then painted up the trim. At this point, the trimmings are entirely up to you. To mimic book pages, I took some antique Waverly wax and carefully colored that in, trimmed everything up so it looked really nice, did a light dusting with our black paint around the frame, and then I added some gears. For this set of apothecary jars, we're going to use a love potion label and a poison label and some small little wine bottles. But before we put our labels on, we're going to get artsy fartsy with some Dollar Tree gauze, tacky glue, and water. I'm sorry. No, not really. I feel like y'all need to experience the crafting ASMR I deal with. I added some water to that mixture and then I put down some wax paper to protect my surface because it's gonna get messy. I'm taking a little bit of this black malty surface paint and mixing it in with the tacky glue and the water so this way it dyes our Dollar Tree gauze. You can use a bunch of things for this. You could use burlap, you could use fabric, you could use tissues or napkins, but gauze is one of my favorites. It also hardens really well. Gauze also absorbs color really well. Look at that, people. It is just melted into there. When this dries, it's going to be absolutely fabulous. We're going to take the gauze and just wrap it around the top. It's also easy to manipulate and spread around. You could use tissues, you could use paper towels, you could use cloth for this as well, or fabric, but gauze for me, I think, is just going to get the look that I'm going for, creating these old musty bottles. Look at that. Looks awesome, right? Unfortunately, we're gonna have to let these suckers dry overnight. That is the worst part about doing things like that, is the dreaded dry time. Just take your time wrapping your bottles up with this stuff. Get it exactly where you want it. I did the same thing for the second bottle. I just put the gauze in a different pattern, and I also wrapped the bottom of these bottles as well and left them to dry. I want to make a nice texture paint to go around these bottles, so I'm going to take my calcium carbonate and baking soda, and no, I'm not measuring. I don't have a measurement for you, okay? Just, measure with love. Sprinkle, add your paints, okay? And I did put a smidge of tacky glue in here to make sure that it kind of holds down our gauze into place as we tappity tap 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 this mixture onto here. You want it nice and buttery smooth. You can absolutely add more baking soda to get a little bit grittier. It's completely up to you. I'm using a pouncer just to tap this medium all over the place, except for the part where we're going to decoupage. That I just took some of our black chalk paint and used in just that section. This way we don't have the texture preventing us from having a nice decoupage label on the front here. See how we can see the division from the texture to the flat black paint? I'll show you how we'll blend it all in a minute. The goal for the top was to take this metallic paint and add to the corks and then glue these beautiful glass knobs from Dollar Tree right onto those. Unfortunately, after I went through the painstaking process of painting all of these and getting it all ready, one thing I didn't account for is this is actually glued in here. Dollar Tree actually glued it in. I thought I was going to be able to just kind of twist it out, because you can do that with a lot of Hobby Lobby's knobs, but we can't. And I really want it to have this gold or rose color underneath. So I'm going to just kind of paint that and then glue this in here. We just won't have a removable top because I really want the top to have these. But you know what? I made it work, okay? It still gave me the same look I was going for, just painting the top of the little wine bottles. I'm just using some Mod Podge for our decoupage medium. Feel free to use whatever you would like. I did cut these labels exactly down to size to go into the sections that I wanted. And then I just used my finger to gingerly move them along and press them down. Once they were dry, I grabbed some of that medium, and to blend everything together, I just tappity tap 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 all around the label. I grabbed some of my Gorilla Glue gel and put around the rims to attach our little glass knobs, and these are stunning. I even took some more of that metallic and rubbed along the texture and along the gauze to give it that dingy appearance. Don't ever feel like you have to go outside and grab real dirt to get that look. You can create that by using normal craft supplies or baking soda and things like that around your home. If you're looking for more creative ways for you to make your next DIY project, check out this video right here. And as always, people, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. And until next time, bye.